grab a tampon. Now imagine it's the only one you'll ever get, yeah, for the rest of your life. No refills, no replacements. What would you actually do? No pharmacy, no pads, no plastic wrap, just you, blood, and whatever the ground happens to give you that day. That was real life across dozens of ancient cultures on nearly every continent for tens of thousands of years. Some answers were clever enough to still work today. Some were strange enough to sound completely made up. One is hiding inside a 100,000-year-old cave in South Africa. Another is carved into a bone that might be the world's oldest calendar. And it wasn't built for what everyone assumed, for decades, without question. Today we're ranking 10 of those answers, worst to best, across real civilizations, real timelines, and a few objects sitting in museums right now waiting for somebody to ask the right question about them. Stick around, because rank 1 isn't what you're picturing. Not even close. And once you hear it, you'll understand exactly why nobody saw it coming. Rank 10. Africa, somewhere around 200,000 years ago. The very first Homo sapiens, right at the beginning of the human story. Long before agriculture. Long before writing. Long before almost anything we'd recognize. So, what do you do when nothing exists yet to help you at all? Nothing. That's the whole answer. Blood happened and life kept moving around it. No pad, no wrap, no idea that a solution was even something you could invent. Just a hand, a leaf, whatever happened to be closest, and a world crawling with wolves, lions, and hyenas that can track blood by smell from a genuinely unsettling distance. Every single month, the risk reset itself. No warning. No way to plan around it. Just the same gamble, over and over, for an entire lifetime. This wasn't a choice anyone sat down and made. There was no meeting, no decision, no invention waiting to be discovered yet. It was simply the starting line every single other answer on this list had to climb out of, one small idea at a time. Rank 9 flips the whole story on its head. Ancient Egypt, somewhere around 1500 BCE, a fully built civilization with cities, writing, and doctors. What if the tampon isn't a modern invention at all? Egyptian women softened papyrus reed until it was gentle enough to use. A little later, over in classical Greece, women wrapped soft wool tightly around a small wooden stick instead. A shape you'd recognize instantly today. And here's the part that makes this one different from the rest of the list. We actually know it for certain. No guessing required, no theory, no maybe. It's written down in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered, roughly 110 pages of ancient Egyptian medicine, still sitting today inside a German university library, studied by real historians who can read the actual words on the page. Thousands of years before your bathroom cabinet, somebody had already worked out the shape, tested it, and written it down carefully enough for the next generation to copy without guessing. Now for something a lot stranger. Rank 8 belongs to tribal societies scattered across Africa, the Pacific, and the Americas. Recorded firsthand by anthropologists as recently as the 1800s, though the practice itself almost certainly runs far older than any written record. The Seclusion Hut. Was it exile? Or was it rest? Ask two different women from two different tribes, and you might get two completely opposite answers. For plenty of women, that hut meant peace. No hunting, no hauling water for hours under the sun, no chores waiting at the door, no demands from anyone at all. Just other women, quiet company, low conversation, and a few days that finally, briefly, belonged only to her. For others, in other tribes entirely, the exact same wooden walls meant something else. Punishment. Plain and simple. A way of pushing her out of sight until it passed, with nobody checking in to ask if she was all right. Same hut, same four walls, two completely different truths depending purely on where you happened to be born and who happened to be in charge. Rank 7 pulls us into the ice. Northern Europe, Ice Age hunter-gatherers, roughly 10,000 years ago, quite possibly much more. Sphagnum moss. Strange choice for a top 10 spot, right? Except doctors packed this exact plant into soldiers' open wounds during World War I, thousands of years later, on battlefields nobody in the Ice Age could ever have imagined. It soaks up liquid like a sponge. It fights infection almost on its own, for reasons nobody back then could have explained, and modern doctors only fully understood centuries afterward. So where's the catch? It only grows in certain places. Cold bogs, wetlands, damp northern forests, and nowhere else on the map. No moss nearby meant no option at all. Full stop, no substitute. No workaround. In a very real sense, your period care depended entirely on your geography, and nothing else you could control. What if timing did the work that tools never had to? Rank 6 isn't a material at all. It's biology quietly doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes without anyone noticing. Look at the Hadza people of Tanzania today, one of the last true hunter-gatherer groups left on Earth, still hunting and gathering the way humans did for most of history, studied closely by anthropologists for decades now. Their girls often don't start their period until years later than girls growing up in modern cities do, sometimes considerably later. Why the delay? Constant walking day after day, hard physical work, never quite enough food to spare for growth to speed up. If it holds true for the Hadza right now, in the present day, under close scientific observation, it very likely held just as true for ancient women across thousands of generations that came before them, all the way back. Puberty simply waited its turn patiently until the body decided it could finally afford the cost. Rank 5 is the strangest kind of hidden. Hidden not because it was buried, but because it was never meant to be found by outsiders. In tribal groups across several continents, documented well into the last century, women kept something men were never given access to at all. A private word, a hand sign, a small, quiet signal. Something meant only for each other and nobody else. Ever. What was it even for? Nobody outside the circle ever really knew, and honestly, nobody was ever supposed to. Maybe, just maybe, that secrecy was the entire point of the thing all along. Passed mother to daughter, generation after generation, quietly, without ceremony, without a single written record left behind for outsiders to ever stumble across. If you weren't a woman, the door simply stayed shut, no matter who you were or how hard you listened. No explanation offered, none ever needed. Rank 4 turns the entire problem into a rule. And, strangely enough, a surprisingly effective one. Across dozens of tribal cultures, some of which are still practiced today, menstrual blood was never treated as just plain biology. Was it a blessing, or was it a curse? Depended entirely who you asked, and exactly where on Earth you happened to be standing when you asked it. In some places, it was seen as powerful enough to bless an entire harvest or bring luck before a hunt, something almost worth celebrating out loud. In other places entirely unconnected, separated by oceans and thousands of years, it was seen as dangerous enough to be kept far away from food, from weapons, from anyone it might somehow weaken just by being near. Opposite beliefs on opposite sides of the world. Same practical outcome everywhere. Belief did the organizing work that no product, no invention ever could have managed entirely on its own. Now for something genuinely ancient. Blombos Cave, on the coast of South Africa, roughly 100,000 years ago. Rank 3 is the color red. Ochre, ground down carefully into a fine pigment. Found packed inside actual abalone shell toolkits recovered at that very site, dated by scientists using methods that can pin down age within a few thousand years, and used in some of the very oldest deliberate art human hands ever created. Here's the unsettling part. A few researchers have floated a genuinely strange idea about where some of that red might have actually come from. Not paint, blood. Nobody can prove it. Nobody may ever be able to prove it one way or the other. The evidence is simply too old, too fragile, too far gone. But if it's true, humanity's oldest surviving paintings might be hiding something inside them that nobody who's ever stood in front of one, staring up in awe, ever expected to find hiding in plain sight. Rank 2 belongs to a single small object you could hold in one hand. The Ishango bone. Central Africa, roughly 20,000 years ago, now kept carefully inside a museum in Belgium. Rows of small notches cut deliberately, one by hand, into old bone. A fossil baboon bone, to be precise, sharpened at one end like a tool, but covered in these strange, careful markings instead. For decades, researchers assumed the same thing everyone else did. It tracked the moon, or maybe hunting seasons, or simply the passing days, one notch at a time. Simple enough, right? Case closed, or so everyone thought. But look closer and something strange starts to happen. The number of notches lines up almost exactly with the menstrual cycle, again and again. So which is it really? A moon calendar carved by an ancient astronomer studying the sky? Or something far more personal, carved by someone quietly counting an entirely different rhythm? If the second answer turns out to be right, everything changes. The oldest calendar humans ever made wasn't built for the sky above them at all. It wasn't the moon. It wasn't the stars. It wasn't the seasons. It might have been built for this all along, hiding in plain sight inside a museum case. But here's the thing. What could possibly beat a 20,000-year-old calendar carved into bone? Whatever you're picturing for rank 1 right now, forget it completely. Wipe the slate clean. It's not a tool. It's not a tribe. It's not even something anyone, anywhere ever consciously chose. Rank 1 belongs to the body itself. Every population on every continent for hundreds of thousands of years across the entire Ice Age. What happens when your own body quietly decides that survival matters more than anything else? When food ran short, or the body pushed itself too hard for too long, periods didn't get harder to manage. They simply stopped. Completely. No blood. No bleeding. Nothing at all left to survive in the first place. Sounds almost too simple to be real, doesn't it? But this exact thing still happens today. In athletes who train far too hard, or in anyone whose body suddenly runs dangerously low on fuel for too long. For ancient women, this wasn't rare and it wasn't occasional. It was constant, a near permanent state stretching across long portions of an entire lifetime, silently, without drama, without anyone even noticing it was happening. The body just quietly switched it off, on its own, and nobody, anywhere, at any point, ever had to decide a single thing. And that's the real answer. The one none of these 10 ranks can actually beat, no matter how strange or clever they get. Stack it all together, one layer on top of the other, starting late, stopping under pressure, then pregnancy, then years of breastfeeding immediately afterward, then pregnancy again, and the whole cycle repeating for most of an adult life. And many ancient women may have gone through only a small handful of periods across an entire lifetime. Compare that to today, where a woman can go through several hundred over the course of her life, month after month, decade after decade. That's the real reason we never dig up ancient pads or ancient wraps or tools built specifically for this one job, no matter how carefully archaeologists search. It's not that ancient women hid them especially well, or that everything simply rotted away without a trace, leaving nothing behind for us to find. It's that for most of human history across most of the inhabited world, the period the way we know it today, regular, monthly, expected, arriving right on schedule, barely happened at all. 10 answers. Africa, Egypt, Greece, the ice fields of ancient Europe. Some clever enough to still make sense today. Some strange enough to sound invented. One hiding inside a cave wall for 100,000 years. One hiding inside a small bone for 20,000, waiting patiently in a glass case for someone to look twice. But the biggest twist was never actually one of the 10. It's that the entire problem itself was never as big or as constant as we've always quietly assumed it must have been. And that single idea changes how you look at every bone, every cave wall, every ancient object you thought you already understood. I hope this one was worth your time. If you want to see what else ancient humans dealt with, check out the video right on your screen. And if you enjoyed this one, a like, a share, or if you're feeling kind, a subscribe would genuinely mean a lot. Please, if you liked it, consider subscribing. This is Ancient and After, signing off. See you in the next one.